Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Arlene Diamco, the multidimensional MD. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, I'm going to talk about generational trauma or intergenerational trauma, or what we call ancestral trauma. And as always, my mission is to help bring the intuitive aspects of health back to medicine in practical and tangible ways so that you can access more peace, love, and joy in your everyday life. And when I was sitting this week, this theme came up over and over again. Multiple people have mentioned it. And really, it's something that affects everyone in various ways. Some people more than others, and some people have had more intense stress and trauma in their um, generations than others. But we all have ancestors, we all have a past, we all have a family past. And so this is a topic that really affects everybody in some way. So the first thing is to recognize intergenerational trauma. And first is to know that this is real. There's the field of epigenetic studies that shows how behavior and environment can affect how your genes are expressed. And so we know a lot more about generational trauma now than we did before. And so we have our genes, your genotype, but your genes don't always determine what your phenotype is, the expression of your genes. So there is a lot that goes into that. And in the field of epigenetics, there is a famous study by Dr. Rachel Yehuda at Mount Sinai in New York City. And they studied the effects of the Dutch famine in World War II. So women that were pregnant during the Dutch famine passed on the stress of the famine to their children. So their children in middle age were more likely to suffer from obesity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and schizophrenia. So that is really huge. So what Dr. Yehuda found was that there were epigenetic changes to a gene linked to cortisol, which is a major stress hormone. So if you think about just anything that's happened in your family's past, is it still affecting you today? Maybe, maybe not. It doesn't have to, but there is a way through the gene expression that it can be passed down. So like many of you, I've also had family on both sides with war trauma. So this kind of research means something to me, both personally and professionally. And I remember once when I was little and my grandfather exploded at me and my brother over some stupid thing that we were arguing about. And he just got so frustrated with us. And you can recognize this. If you're a parent, you can recognize getting frustrated with your kids arguing. But the intensity of his explosion towards us scared me. But at the same time, even though I was little, I was sort of curious about it. I was sort of like cocking my head and kind of looking with a curiosity, trying to understand what was going on, because the emotional intensity didn't match the situation. And, fortunately, I feel like I had that kind of like deep sort of like knowing and intuition, even when I was younger. So I don't remember holding it against him, because deep down, I realized there was something else contributing to this that I couldn't put a finger on. Like I knew that it wasn't just me and my brother, because it was just like a little thing that we were arguing about. And then he had such a big reaction to it. So later in middle school, I did a report on him and then learned about his experience during the war and the Bataan Death March in the Philippines. So this was this was torture. So they were made to march to their deaths. And so he watched many of his friends die, and he miraculously escaped by, I don't know how he snuck off and convinced this woman who had a little boat and she was pregnant. She had a baby, and she convinced her to like pretend for him to be the father of the baby so that he could escape that way. So that is, just my personal experience with intergenerational trauma. And, you can see just through that example some ways that it can be expressed. So there's this difficulty with emotions, and it could be a difficulty discussing emotions or naming them, trying to contain them, act fine no matter what, until something triggers you and makes you explode. There can also be like this hypervigilance or being in a constant state of fight or flight. And it is it's not something that unless you start to recognize it and be aware of it, it's like you're just living in this constant pattern. And so you can start to shift that. And like I mentioned before, there is also a risk of physical issues. There can be cardiovascular issues, heart attack, stroke, diabetes, obesity, schizophrenia, really anything. So you think about how much stress and those cortisol levels can affect the body. So it can create an more create a situation where you're more at risk for any health related issues. So we're learning more and more about that through research, which is really amazing because part of my mission is to help medicine to become more trauma informed. Because if we have this understanding of how the past can affect our present and our physical health, our mental emotional health, our spiritual health, then we can better understand it and we can take steps to address it. So that's why I'm here talking about it today. So you can also be numbing out in various ways. So that could be from binge watching TV, binging on food, or even turning to alcohol, drugs, or perhaps like just overworking or being over busy, never wanting to slow down or rest, because if you're constantly busy, then you don't have the quiet. When you're quiet, you start to hear things, you start to feel things, you start to recognize what's going on inside you. And if it's uncomfortable, then you may not want to address it. But just start to realize that. And then you can start to realize also that you can do something about it. Your awareness, your consciousness plays a huge factor in shifting the effects of intergenerational trauma. So there have been studies just showing that if you have any practice of establishing a state of inner quiet, it could be via mindfulness meditation, yoga, tai chi, basically being in the stillness or being still, this radical acceptance of yourself. So it is not a completely passive way of being quiet, but it's a conscious choosing way. So you're choosing to develop this practice where you can maintain and groove in new pathways, new ways of addressing yourself, of loving yourself, of responding to the world. So because the neural pathways from the past, so those subconscious pathways, also from your past, but also your generational past, can be really strong. So if you don't have any consciousness to groove in a new pathway, then you're going to be running on these subconscious trauma patterns, including generational trauma or intergenerational trauma, ancestral trauma. So choose, so with your awareness, to start to take a look at it. And what's interesting is that the research has shown that just like how ancestral trauma can have changes in stress hormones like cortisol, as well as serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter important for mood, focus, calm, temperature, digestion, and more. And generational trauma also affects your neurotrophins, which are these proteins that help regulate the nervous system. Well, when you develop this state of quiet within you through these practices of mindfulness, of meditation, yoga, tai chi, or you choose the practices you would like, then you can actually influence these same systems in your body. So the cortisol regulation, that serotonin, that feel-good neurotransmitter, it affects your digestion, affects your temperature, affects your breathing and blood flow, and also these quieting practices can affect these neurotrophins, again, that help to regulate your nervous system. So, isn't that interesting? So, even though generational trauma affects these systems, there are things that you can do and incorporate into your life that also affect these systems. So, and in this, there was this one study through Frontiers in um, Psychology, and it suggests that the achievement of a state of inner silence through the practice of meditation can prevent or reverse the detrimental effects of a stressful environment. So we know this in the studies, and if we are looking even in regular medicine to incorporate more evidence-based medicine, then we should be really using all of the evidence that we have, not just picking and choosing. And then I want you to realize also that this is not just one and done. This will be a practice. So I have an art print in the back of my office, and it says, "The journey and the destination are the same." This is really important to remember right now. I've seen this all week long, especially with the big full moon energy, the first full moon of the year. That was on Sunday night. And I've seen so many people, so many of my patients have gone through huge shifts, huge transformation already, like night and day. And then there'll be this wave of another trigger. And it's like you felt like these things that you're already over with are being triggered again, but differently, in a different way. And that is completely okay. The destination and the journey are the same. And that is part of the fun of living. Over time, you can see it. If you start to have this practice, then you can start to see it. Because if you think about these triggers and waves that go through as just another wave and letting it go through you, so accepting it fully, you have this stress response, then you have this de-stress response, then those waves can continue to pass because life will always have its ups and downs. So we need to learn how to surf the waves of living. And there's always another wave to surf, and that's part of the fun of it. I'll be teaching some tension and trauma release exercises, and that helps you to learn to surf these waves. So you can join me. The next one will actually be Sunday, March 5th. It's going to be a virtual class. So just keep an eye, join my newsletter, my e-love letter I send out once a week if you'd like more information on that. And I'll post the information on my website shortly. That'll be at allworldshealth.com. So I want to give you some other things that you can do to help address this generational trauma. One of the things is to write a letter under the full moon. So we recently had this full moon, and when you pay attention to the cycles of nature, then you can start to step into that flow of nature. So in general, the new moon is a great time to plant seeds, and the full moon is a great time to see them come into fruition, as well as to let go of what no longer serves us. So, if you just take a moment, and you could do this new moon and full moon. So you could kind of set your intentions at the new moon and then write out some releasing things you would like to let go of under the full moon. So just look up and Google when those dates are. I would say maybe set aside about 20 minutes. You can get quiet and just stream of consciousness, write your letter out. And then what you can do is under the moonlight or the noon moon darkness, then you can either put those in a pot and burn them and then sprinkle some water on top just to add another element, or you could dig a hole in the dirt and bury it and let that letter kind of like disintegrate into the earth. So either way, you're sending out the letter. You burn it with the fire, sending it out into the universe, or putting it into the ground and letting the earth help you digest it. So putting this kind of intention into whatever is important to you is a ceremony of sorts. And so that takes me to the next point of ceremony. So ceremony can be such a useful tool. It is really just setting aside some sacred time and space to note what is important to you. So a ceremony has a beginning, a middle, and an end, an opening to it, and the middle part, which is the bulk of it, and the ending just to close that sacred time and space. So we have ceremonies sprinkled all through our lives, weddings, funerals, even birthdays with a birthday cake. So you light the cake, you sing happy birthday, you blow the candles out. That is like the perfect little ceremony that people are so familiar with. So it doesn't have to be anything that sounds strange. And it is an honoring something that is important to you. So you could use that right under in the full moon as a ceremony, but you can make up your own ceremony as well. It just needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning and the end are often similar. So if it's you lighting a candle, then at the end you would blow out the candle. The middle portion is where the bulk of the work is. So I would again set aside about 20 minutes. It could be letter writing. It could just be sitting in quiet reflection. It could be walking through nature, going through the woods in reflection. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It could just be even sitting and looking through old pictures and just paying some honor and respect to them, to your own past, to your family's past, and something quiet like that. You could incorporate it into your life as often as you wish. If you do it more frequently, then it becomes something more of a practice or a ritual, just like setting the dinner table, having dinner together. That would be an example of a simple practice, or yoga or meditation or something else that you can incorporate into your life that I talked about before. The next thing I wanted to talk about is family constellations therapy. So this was something developed by the psychotherapist Bert Hellinger in response to World War II. And this is something that gives an understanding of destructive family patterns and helps free you from it. It's based on love and respect for ancestors and listening to your own soul guidance. It can be done individually. So if you do it individually with a facilitator, with a counselor or therapist familiar with family constellations therapy, then you would use props or something to represent each family member. It, or you could do it in a group with family, with friends, or even people you don't know. We are all connected somehow. So there is a reason that any group gets together. And even if you join a group on your own with people you don't know, it's so interesting because there's a way that everyone is connected, and through the oneness, this becomes like that body, mind, spirit approach. And you can learn through the experience of it, because so many times these issues that we deal with in families are so similar, and there will be some sort of resonance in it. And you can think about family even more loosely. So there is your bloodline, your family, that you're born into, but there's also groups that are families and organizations that have a family history. So you could think about doing it for an organization that you belong to, or if you have a business that's had like a long-standing history and had its ups and downs through the decades, then you could do it for that. So anything could be helped through considering generational trauma, how you can approach it through family constellations therapy or through any of the other ways that I mentioned before. And if you would like to come join me for a tension trauma release class, I would love to see you. I would be happy to help you individually as well if you'd like to come in for an appointment. And I want you to know that you can also take steps on your own. And that's the purpose of me coming here talking about it today. Your awareness, your consciousness of just like having that desire to address the generational trauma for yourself can be so helpful. And you don't need to figure it all out at once. Again, it is the journey and the destination are the same. All you need to know is, what steps do you need to take right now? What do you need to do at this very moment? And maybe it's just resting in reflection, in meditation, and that can be enough. So I hope this helps you in some way. If you would like to know more about it, if you have any questions, then please leave a comment, like, or subscribe. Always love to hear from you. If you leave a comment, then I do my best to respond to all comments, and it helps me know what you're interested in talking about as well. So lots of love to you. If you'd like to connect with me further, you can on Instagram at All Worlds Health, on Facebook, All Worlds Health and Pediatrics, and you can sign up for my e-love letters at allworldshealth with an s.com, allworldshealth.com. I send them out once a week on Wednesdays. And lots of love to you. Have a beautiful rest of your week. I believe in you, and I hope you believe in you too. And I'll see you next week on another episode of the Multidimensional MD, 11 a.m. Eastern Time.